My name is Sam Seymour, and I'm the president of the City Bar Association, and I have the great pleasure to welcome all of you here tonight to hear District Attorney Cyrus Vance give a speech. I know we're all looking forward to hearing from him. Again, as president, my role here is simply to say I'm happy to see so many of you here. We love having these kind of events and having so many interested practitioners and members of the public here to hear what has to be said. I want you, as you look up here and listen to our two speakers tonight, to have a little sympathy on them, because anyone speaking from here has Justice Ginsburg looking down on them with a very harsh eye, and it's a little bit unnerving. And I want to point out that when the district attorney gets up here, he not only has Justice Ginsburg to contend with, but his father is also over there looking over him. So it's an extra pressing thing. I'm going to introduce briefly Harlan Levy, who's going to introduce our guest speaker tonight. Harlan is known to many of you and is a wonderful friend and supporter. He's very active here at the City Bar Association, where he's currently serving as chair of the Council on Criminal Justice. It is his council that's putting on Cy's speech tonight. But as many of you also know, Harlan is now the first Deputy Attorney General of the state of New York, a very important position and one that I know he'll excel at. So without any further ado, I want to welcome Harlan up here to say a few words about Cy, and thank you again for joining us. Thanks.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be introduced by Sam Seymour. The last time that I saw Sam Seymour here at this association, he was speaking, although he had had surgery the day before. He is an iron man. He is a great president of this bar association. My name is Harlan Levy. I'm the chair of the Council on Criminal Justice. I'm very pleased that you're all here tonight. I'm very pleased that the District Attorney of New York County is here tonight to speak about white-collar crime. As most of you know, Cyrus Vance has been the Manhattan District Attorney since January 1st of 2010. As DA, he's been a leader in criminal justice reform and in crime prevention. He's a former Manhattan ADA. He's a former partner in Morvillo Abramowitz, and he is a graduate of Yale University and Georgetown Law School. His speech tonight is special for three reasons. First of all, the Manhattan DA has long been a leader in the prosecution of white-collar crime, and for that reason, all of us are very, very interested to hear his remarks this evening. Second, this is the District Attorney's first speech at the New York City Bar Association since his election, so we're especially grateful to have you here. And third, this is a special evening because so many of us in this room knew Cy Vance before he was the Manhattan DA. Many of us know him, in fact, through this bar association, and we welcome back here tonight with warmth and with pride in what he's accomplished and what he is going to accomplish. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Cyrus Vance.
Thank you, Harlan, for that very generous introduction. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for coming here tonight. It is truly an honor for me to be here to speak with you. I'm joined by my wife, Peggy, tonight, and it's always good to recognize someone who got you here. And Sam, thank you for adding my father to the gallery tonight. I'm sure that he would both be surprised and proud. Surprised because I remember very well that when I moved out to the West Coast in the late 80s, my father pulled me aside and said, "Cy, you are raising the white flag on your legal career." So I think he would be surprised that I'm here today, and I think he'd be proud, as any father would of a son, but I think really more proud of this institution, which was so dear to him. He was a former president of the City Bar. While he is known by most as a diplomat, he identified himself first and foremost as a lawyer. And he identified himself, above all things, as a New York lawyer. In his association with this institution, his love for the commitment of the lawyers in this institution to work together as lawyers to make our legal system better was, I think, what sustained him throughout his entire career. So I know he would be proud indeed to see everybody here tonight and to see this institution thriving under Sam Seymour's leadership today, as it has under so many of Sam's predecessors. When I spoke last, actually, in this building, it was in 2008 at a meeting of the Criminal Justice Council, which I was a member of, and it was to talk about the role of the modern prosecutor. And now, today that I am district attorney, I can assure you that I think every day about the prosecutor's role. And I think it's pretty straightforward. In Manhattan, the primary role of the prosecutor has been and will continue to be to ensure the safety of the public on our streets, in our daily lives, and in our homes. In fact, I think it's fair to say that today, as never before in our office's history, have we had a more sophisticated understanding of the street crime problem in Manhattan, nor been more proactive as an office in addressing that problem. But as passionate as I am about our battle against violent crime, as well as many other things of interest to the city bar, conviction integrity, reentry, alternatives to incarceration, a discussion of our initiatives of the office in the past year in those areas will have to wait for another day. What I would like to talk to you about today and to put into historical perspective is, as Harlan said, the Manhattan DA's office's continuing leadership role in the battle against white-collar crime. Each of my three immediate predecessors, Tom Dewey, Frank Hogan, and Bob Morgenthau, implemented new strategies when they were district attorneys to deal with the increasingly complex economic crimes that threaten the public during their tenures. And like my predecessors, I am very mindful of the staggering economic costs that white-collar crime exacts from all of us in this law-abiding society. As we sit here tonight, it's hard to believe that the term white-collar crime is in fact barely 70 years old. It was coined in 1939 by a sociologist, Edwin Sutherland, who defined it as a crime committed by a person of respectability and high social status in the course of his occupation. Now, of course, we know that's a much too narrow definition of those who commit white-collar crime, but like my predecessors, I recognize that the very legitimacy of law enforcement depends upon demonstrating that the powerful, the wealthy, and the privileged enjoy no immunity from prosecution as a consequence of their status. What comes to mind as I talk to you tonight is the expression, everything old is new again, both in terms of the crimes we're seeing and the investigative techniques we are using to combat crime. People in positions of trust are still embezzling from their companies and their clients. Investment advisors and brokers are still misrepresenting the nature of their investments to make a fast buck. Companies still manipulate their balance sheets to deceive investors and prop up their stock prices. But these recurring themes don't tell the whole story confronting the Manhattan DA's office in 2011, as the very nature of our economy has changed dramatically over the past generation. White-collar crime has changed dramatically as well, and all of us in law enforcement must evolve in our strategies to keep pace. What I'd like to do tonight is to split my remarks in three parts. First, I'd like to talk with you about some of our office's innovations in the area of white-collar crime enforcement, both structural and substantive. Next, I'd like to talk about an important enforcement tool that the Manhattan DA's office has been using for decades, the Martin Act, and how we will apply that tool to securities fraud today. And finally, I'd like to talk to you about a category of frauds that is indeed new, identity theft and cybercrime. I have said many, many times that the internet is the crime scene of the 21st century. Tonight, I'd like to talk to you about what we're recovering at that crime scene. Starting with white-collar crime, I'd like to begin with a bit of history. The enforcement of sophisticated frauds and securities laws has traditionally been a local law enforcement function in New York. District Attorney Joe Banton was bringing securities fraud cases in the 1920s, and in 1938, Thomas Dewey prosecuted Richard Whitney, former president of the New York Stock Exchange, for stealing from the clients of his securities firm. That same year, District Attorney Dewey established a specialized fraud bureau in the Manhattan DA's office. Today, that historic frauds bureau has been absorbed into the major economic crimes bureau in our office, which we created last April. And we created that new bureau because I came to see the interrelationships among a wide variety of white-collar prosecutions that had been handled in diverse units previously scattered throughout the DA's office, and believed that by joining them under a single leader, we would achieve practical and strategic advantages. The new bureau today is comprised of approximately 30 assistant district attorneys and nearly 40 staff. And to head the bureau, we were fortunate, very fortunate indeed, to attract Rich Weber, an accomplished former federal prosecutor who headed the National Asset Forfeiture and Money Laundering section of the Department of Justice and who moved here from Washington to help us in our efforts. His focus, my focus, has been to continue building criminal cases that profoundly impact the diverse elements of our financial systems. Securities, commodities, and investment fraud are a major focus, as are mortgage fraud and financial institution fraud. Consolidating these functions within one unit capitalizes on one great strength that we in local law enforcement have long enjoyed, particularly in Manhattan, but which I doubt is fully appreciated by the public: the broad reach that we have into the community that we serve. Our office last year handled more than 100,000 filed criminal cases. Now, most of those cases are not complex fraud cases, but it is a huge number, and in fact, numbers more than all of the criminal cases filed by the Department of Justice last year in the nation. No other prosecutor's office handles the volume, the breadth, and the complexity of cases that we do in Manhattan. And this is important because major fraud cases can come from anywhere. Many of you, probably most of you, no doubt know about a local sales tax investigation that the Manhattan DA's office handled several years ago. The office learned of a corporate executive who bought artworks and schemed to avoid paying the local sales tax on his purchases. That corporate executive was Dennis Kozlowski. And what began as a more or less routine investigation of sales tax evasion mushroomed into the Tyco prosecution, one of the most significant corporate fraud cases in our office's history.